Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. Today we're going to talk a bit about the country which is one of the last complete true tax havens, and I would say probably one of the more livable ones, and that is Bahrain. Okay, so for those of you who are not familiar, it's very close to UAE. It is in the Middle East. It is much smaller than UAE. Kind of traditionally very rich country in oil reserves. There is a famous line that Allah has no eyes in Bahrain, which is meant to mean that very famously people would come over from Saudi in order to take advantage of all kinds of things they could not do there because of various different local Muslim laws. And so kind of famously much more liberal for quite a long period of time. I remember hearing stories from people who were growing up in Saudi, and kind of some of the restrictions they would have. I think they were smuggling bacon or something back from Bahrain. So anyway, it's kind of historically been that, and it is pretty famously the one place that still has no personal tax and no corporate tax. Okay, so that's quite interesting. And yet, in spite of this, there are not a lot of companies there. Now, generally speaking, it is not as great a place to live, just in terms of it's much quieter, there's not as much going on, etc., as you will get in some place like UAE, Qatar, etc. Even Oman, I would say, kind of offers quite a bit more. And so that's, been somewhat of an issue. However, as other places start to bring on more and more rules, potentially Bahrain is an increasingly attractive part of the world to form a company, to get residency, potentially to do banking. There's a bunch of different banking options there. And so all of these things are available. However, they have recently announced that they may be attempting to bring in a new remittance-based tax. Now, what I mean by this is actually the opposite of what we normally talk about when we're talking about remittance. So normally what we're talking about when we're talking about remittance-based is you don't pay tax if you don't bring the money into the country. So famously, they have things like Malta in their non-dom program. If you look at Singapore, they've got this kind of quasi-remittance base. If you look at Thailand, they've got this remittance base. If you look at Gibraltar, they've got this remittance base. There's a variety of different places that have this remittance basis of tax. And that was famously the non-dom in UK, and then you've got also the non-dom when it comes to Ireland. Now, here they're doing sort of the opposite, which is a little bit odd. This is for local workers who are essentially trying to send remittances out of the country, that these would get hit with some sort of a tax. Now, there's some concerns this will create some black market, there'll be all sorts of stuff. So it's sort of a new model of tax. People have not tried this before. It's designed to hit, a specific segment of the population, etc. And so we will see, A, whether they actually implement it, B, whether it's successful. There is some narrative that the other Gulf countries may copy it if they do it. I guess you could think of it a little bit more like a sales tax than an actual income tax. And it's unclear how it would affect sort of, a broad base of people. However, what I think you're seeing in general, and this is a framework for making sense of what is going on in the world in those types of places, right, is you're in a situation where they're basically trying to figure out how do they compensate revenues as oil income declines. So a lot of these countries have had big oil revenues for a long period of time. That's basically sustained them. They haven't had a need to apply income tax because of that. Dubai is actually quite an anomaly in this regard. Dubai has a very small percentage of their overall GDP that comes from oil, and that's maybe, necessity of some other invention, possibly driven them to help diversify their economy more effectively than some other places. If you compare to Abu Dhabi, they have much more share of oil revenue. If you look at Oman, if you look at Bahrain, in the case of Qatar, you're talking about mostly natural gas. Obviously, Saudi is big on oil. And so, they know that over time this is not a sustainable income stream. And so what do they do about it? Now, one way of dealing with that is to say, okay, let's just apply the normal taxes. Now, the issue is if you don't have a lot of other business, if you don't have a lot of other people, et cetera, it's not necessarily that effective. Dubai has been super smart because they've built this whole massive economy that is majority expats. They just had a record. I think it was 92 million people arrive in the airport. So as we're talking about like annual arrivals. And so 92 million, just like an insane number of people who are coming and spending money. And so then if you can apply VAT and you can have hotel taxes and you can have some things like this, your local people who are living there don't have to pay income tax. You don't necessarily have to have as high corporate tax. You can kind of readjust in these regards. Bahrain does not have that, right? It's not like there's a flood of people going to Bahrain. And so it's questionable what they're going to have to do. At some point in time, they will need to make some changes. And this is sort of an early period of experimentation. We'll see. Maybe they will be successful. Maybe they will not. I don't think that it really sends a message of stability that a lot of people would want to go and get set up there. I know, as I said, in spite of the fact that they're like kind of this remaining holdout when it comes to corporate tax, we don't typically have a lot of clients where we're setting up in Bahrain. It happens once in a while, but not too often. And that's, going to be threatened further by this sort of instability. So anyway, we will see what happens overall. If you would like help with setting up international corporate structures, paying as little tax as legally possible, and designing kind of around the rules depending on where you're living, or help with relocation, figuring out where to go and how to optimize that way, please reach out to us. You can book a call with me, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer, link in the description below, or send a message through offshorecitizen.net. And I will look forward to seeing you on the next video.